Hi, Martin, the AKM project guy, back for part 3 of the King Tut build. In this episode, I guess we're going to be working on completing the back side of the headdress and also working on the facial front portion to see if we can get that going and get it in place. So, without further ado, let's get started. Okay, as you can see from last time, I've taken the 5 panels on the right side. I cemented them together and lightly cemented them to the base so that I can start to remove the extra foam. Now I kept it just a little bit large until I finish this side, and then we'll take both sides down to the desired shape that we want at the same time. As you can see, I have finished the panels on the right side of the back part of the headdress. I had cemented those panels together. However, I haven't glued it to the other side just yet, but I did temporarily tack it down enough so that I can remove the extra foam and get a little closer to the shape to try and match the other side. Now, I am still a little bit large, oversized, and the reason for that is what I want to do first is attach the frontal facial piece on here, and then once that's in place, we can whittle down the overall shape and get it to where I want it to be to finalize it. Okay, so the first thing I did is we moved a little more material down here at the base of the neck because I want a nice flat surface for this piece to fit into. And then I took 2 sheets of paper, taped them together, and then I cut a little notch at the bottom so it can fit down in there like so. And then where it came to the top, where it met the top part of the headdress there, I put a mark. Okay, so this is a 8.5 by 11 standard sheet of paper. And what's good about that is my printer gives me a preview of this size. So all I need to do is find a profile photo of the King Tut sculpture and blow it up to where it matches this. And that's exactly what I've done here. I found a true profile, meaning we're looking right at it from the side. This is the edge here right behind the ear. So I was very fortunate to find that. And so what I did is I just blew it up just using reference, just thinking that it has to match my 2-page cutout. And luckily I got it on the first try. If I didn't, I would just have to go back and make it a little larger, a little smaller, but we were dead on the first try, so that's very good. So now I have this blown up pretty much to scale, and now I can take this and put it in where it's gonna go. And as you can see, that pretty much gives me an idea of this piece once I cut the profile out of how it will match. So now all I have to do is take this picture, turn my panels to the side, and then we just need to trace that on to this and cut it out. And then, of course, we have to put the, as you look at it from the front, we need to cut this out as well. We need to trace it on both sides and cut it out. And these other panels I'll add later because my foam cutter, I'm kind of limited to how many. So I know I can't fit 8 underneath there and do a profile. So we'll just get the 4, and that should cover most of the facial region, and then we'll add this back on later as I carve and whittle it down to make it try and look right. Okay, so what I've done is I've taken the blow up of the profile image and I defined it with a black marker, the edges, and then I cut it out using an X-Acto knife. And now I'm placing it on my panels that are going to house the bulk of the facial portion. And you can see here I had to add a couple of millimeters to make up for this little recessed area here that it's going to fit into. Okay, so I traced my pattern onto the front surface of our panels, the top surface I should say. And the only thing I need to worry about is this down here. This represents the neck portion here, but we have this little recessed area that actually goes down maybe an inch more. So I don't want to cut it right there. So I just extended the lines here and we'll cut straight down. And to give my reference point as to where this panel should fit, I just did a side projection off of the profile. So we took the profile up here at the top, projected it over, and I got my line to where that should start. So hopefully everything will line up right. And I'm going to cut this out all in one piece because I have to use this again to cut it down from the front. Okay, as you can see, I went ahead and cut out my pattern on both sides, and I have it in place. And then we can attach it to the headdress panel, and then I can start to whittle away at it and try and get down to the final base shape. Okay, as you can see, I'm starting to work on the face, and I have some reference lines here for the mouth, nose, and where the eyes should fit. But I want to take a minute to step back and show you how I came up to getting these lines in place. Okay, so apart from obviously having a project for my YouTube channel, the reason I like doing these sculptures is in much the same way that someone might like doing a crossword puzzle. It's a challenge, and I derive a certain amount of joy from the challenge of taking a 2D image, which is what a picture is, and creating a three-dimensional sculpture using those photos. Now, there's a challenge in doing that because inherently when you take a three-dimensional image and flatten it and make it a 2D image, especially if there's curves on it, there's going to be some distortions. And so you got to be careful and look out for those distortions. Now with that in mind, I'm going to go back and show you how I got these reference points and how I need to be careful when I deal with those distortions that might come up. And as you notice on this drawing, there's no facial features. Okay, so how do I get the facial features? Take this image and blow it up and use that to determine where the various facial features go. And that's exactly what I've done here. I've blown this image up to scale and I printed it out, and I'm going to use this to figure out where the reference lines that I need in order to sculpt the sculpture and hopefully get it to look the way that I want it to look. Okay, so but the challenge of doing that is I have to marry up this side view with this front view. And if you lay them down flat on the surface and you try to line them up, you see that they don't line up quite the way that they should. And so for example, if I line up the chin with the bottom, You can see that the lips are off, and also the nose is off. The nose is much lower than it should be. Why is that? Well, that's because you're looking at a photo of a three-dimensional object that has curves, and so therefore there's going to be distortion. Okay, so as I look at this photo, I have to assume that the center of the camera lens, when it took this picture, was right there at the chin. And if I go off to the right here, I can see there's a band. That chin is lining up with the upper part of this first band. So as a reference, if I line up on my sculpture and I make sure that the chin is lined up in this area, that pretty much is going to duplicate the angle that the camera was looking when it took this photo. And since this photo is what I'm basing my sculpture on, that's what this drawing was based on, that should help me. So if I line the photo up on the chin, that should be a good starting reference point. But I also need a second reference point to line it up properly. And that's where this little ridge here on the top part of the eye comes in. So, and I left that on there intentionally. Instead of when I did this profile, I could have ignored that and just came right up here. But I want this as a reference. So that tells me where the top of the eye roughly should go. So what I did when I laid this when I laid my cutout down, I lined it up with the chin. And I also lined it up with this ridge, which represents that eye bulge when I cut it out from the side. And then I projected the line over to where that should be on my paper. So now if I line that up with that ridge line there, that should give me a pretty good idea of where where this should situate. And if I duplicate the same look, if I look down at here and I make sure it's lined up roughly up into this area, then I see how that photo actually lays down on my sculpture. And so now I can use this to kind of gauge where the eye should be, and that should help me figure this out. So actually it would be pressed down a little bit more here to match that view. Now, this is not etched in stone because, again, this is not the angle that the eye sits. The eye actually is going to sit on a downward plane here. So I'm still getting somewhat distortion, but what this helps me do is solve the puzzle of how to recreate this face, this two-dimensional image onto a three-dimensional image. And so I'll have to line this up from time to time. As I work on this side of the face, I'll have to line this up and make sure everything looks relatively straight. And then once I get this side finished, I'll just look over at this side in order to complete the other side. But this it's just giving me clues as to how I can do this and help save time versus just attacking a big block of foam and finding the King Tut sculpture down in there. So, and basically that's all what these reference points do and the cutouts, is it just helps me solve the puzzle and gets me to where I want to be a little faster.